Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting International Carnivorous Plant Society's monthly webinar. Recently, we've been having more than one a month. I'm excited to introduce Weng Ngai to talk more about inquilines. This time, we're going to be talking about Nepenthes, inquilines. And if you're attending this live, please ask Weng Ngai questions through the chat, and I will read all of the best questions at the end. And with that, Weng Ngai, you can start your presentation, and thank you so much for agreeing to present for us.
No problem at all. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. I grew up reading a lot of the ICPS articles and website, and it's a pleasure to be able to present an event like this. Anyway, hi everyone. My name is Weng Ngai. I'm from Singapore. I'm an assistant professor at the Asian School of the Environment in Nanyang Technological University. Today I'll be talking about inquilines, the animals that live inside Nepenthes pitcher plants. Just a quick introduction to myself. I'm currently the principal investigator of this lab that just recently started. I just recently started as assistant professor. I call the lab the Plant Invertebrate Ecology Lab. I'm a community ecologist by training. I work on nutrient cycling, forest dynamics, leaf litter, invertebrates, and the kinds of ecosystem functions that they perform. I started out long ago as a Nepenthes hobbyist. I grew a lot of pitcher plants when I was a teenager. I was quite crazy about collecting them, and it sort of led into a PhD on Nepenthes inquilines, using the communities in the pitchers as a model ecosystem for ecology research. Unfortunately, I kind of moved away from pitcher plants more recently because the topic's a bit too niche to survive in academia. But they are my first love, and a lot of the work I'm going to be sharing today is based on my PhD work on these pitcher plants, as well, of course, on the broader literature on inquilines and their kinds of roles in pitcher plant ecosystems. So I come from Singapore, that small little country, that small little dot, which is barely visible on this map at the tip of peninsular Malaysia. But it is the center of diversity for Nepenthes, which is mainly Southeast Asian genus. In Singapore, which is a very small country, because of the limited land area and types of habitats, we only have 3 native species, all of which are very well studied. Common lowland species, Nepenthes ampullaria, gracilis, and rafflesiana. And a lot of my work was based on these 3 species, which have a very broad range across the Southeast Asia. I am not going to be talking so much about rarer species today, mainly because the study of inquilines, the invertebrates that live in these pitchers, the study of inquilines is very limited. Taxonomically, it's mostly based on common lowland Nepenthes species, and the inquilines of highland Nepenthes are generally very, very poorly studied. So a lot of the work that we present are based on these very common species. This is a brief overview of what I'm going to be covering today. I'm going to give a quick introduction first to what are inquilines. I'm going to talk about the diversity of inquilines, the different types of inquilines that are, and the groups that they are sort of classified into. I'm going to talk about the relationship between pitcher plants and their inquilines. And then finally, I'm just going to end with some simple take-home messages from all that we've discussed. So, Nepenthes and their inquilines. In case, I'm sure everyone here knows exactly what pitcher plants are, but I'm just going to go through this nevertheless. Nepenthes pitcher plants are carnivorous plants, obviously. But that is an important thing about that is that they are in their natural habitat. They are limited by resources, nitrogen and phosphorus. Limited meaning that you give it more nitrogen, the fitness of that species or the performance of that species improves more or less proportionately. They are passive traps, which is the reason why they are inhabited by inquilines. They are fluid-filled pitchers. and prey drop in passively. They don't shut the way a Venus flytrap might. These aquatic habitats, although the graveyard for many of the prey species, are actually a very good home for many more specialized kinds of insects and animals, which we call inquilines. The traps do secrete enzymes, but the role of enzymes in digestion of prey is actually much smaller than most of the existing literature of Nepenthes describe it to be. The role of enzymes is actually the role of inquilines is arguably much more important for prey digestion than enzymes, especially in some of the species I'm going to be talking about later, like Ampullaria and Bicarcarata. So many invertebrate species colonize pitchers. In fact, in the wild, it is almost impossible to find a pitcher that is not colonized by one or more species of invertebrates, inquilines. Inquilines can be extremely diverse, especially in long-lived pitchers with high pH, like Nepenthes ampullaria, Nepenthes bicarcarata, Nepenthes vegii. The vast majority of these inquilines are detritivores or microbivorous. In other words, they feed directly on the prey carcasses or on the bacteria or fungi that consume the prey. And of course, a minority of these inquilines are predatory, and even smaller minority are parasitic. Detritivores inquilines likely function as digestive mutualists. In other words, they most likely have a net beneficial effect on the Nepenthes and their pitchers, especially when the prey are large and recalcitrant. So I'll talk a bit more about that later on, but let's talk a bit about how inquilines are classified. Traditionally, there are three types of classification: the Nepentibionts, the Nepentaphiles, the Nepentazines. I'll use crab spiders, spiders in general as an example of these. So Nepentibionts are animals which are obligate mutualistic. They depend on the pitchers for their survival. An example is Thomisus nepenthophilus. The name itself tells you Nepenthophilus, the friend of Nepenthes. It lives and breeds in Nepenthes gracilis pitchers. You will never find this anywhere else. Remove the pitcher plants and this species will cease to exist. So it's an obligate mutualist. Nepentaphiles are sort of facultative inquilines. In other words, they can occasionally use pitchers. In fact, some of them develop a bit of a liking for pitchers. An example here is Thomisus guamsicus, another crab spider species, but this crab spider species is often found on other kinds of plants. But they realize, that hey, if I come near the pitcher, there's a lot of food coming in this area, and they develop a little bit of a tendency to use pitchers when the opportunity arises. Nepentazines are opportunistic, sort of incidental kind of inquilines. So an example here is this obweaver spider, Parawixia dehani, which I found in pictures before, but it's almost accidental. They generally don't use pitchers as their habitats. Actually, some of the best known inquilines. Every time I tell people, when I was doing my PhD, I say, I work on pitcher plants and the animals that live in them. They say, have you seen the crab that stays that live in the pitcher? Or have you seen the frogs that breed in pitchers? And actually, these they're the best known, but they're actually facultative or even opportunistic kind of inhabitants of pitchers. All three examples here, even the bat here, which is a very well-known inhabitant of Nepenthes hamsleiana, it roosts elsewhere. If Nepenthes hamsleiana goes extinct, the bat will not go extinct. So I'm not going to be talking about these facultative mutualists. I'm going to be focusing today on Nepentibionts, species that are so specialized on pitchers that they will not live and breed anywhere else. So, inquiline diversity. I mentioned just now that inquilines are extremely diverse, but the diversity is predictable in the sense that generally you would find a large diversity of species in long-lived pitchers, which have less acidic fluids. And actually, if you test the enzyme concentration in these pitchers, the protease enzymes are also secreted in much lower concentrations as compared to these species. And in ecology, we call this the fast and slow trade-off or continuum. These are resource acquisition strategies. Let me emphasize, these are resource acquisition strategies. They are not growth rates. I'm not saying that all these species grow faster than these species. Sorry, there's a mistake here. I just realized it's not Nepenthes ampularia here, not Rafflesiana. I typed wrongly. Slow strategies would be ampularia, bicalcata, VHEI, these kinds of long-lived pitchers. I'm not saying that fast strategies grow faster than slow strategies, but in terms of the acquisition of prey nutrients, these pitchers trap prey rapidly. The pitchers open, high volumes of prey are attracted by high volumes of nectar. They fall in, they die in the hundreds, and then the pitchers, shortly after, the pitchers senesce. And they acquire all that nutrients in just a couple of months. Slow strategies like Ampulera and Bicalcata, they open for a long time. They don't actually have a lot of nectar secretions. The prey accumulates slowly, very, very sort of stochastically, and the nutrients come in as a slow trickle over a long period of time. So that's what I mean by slow strategies. And in these types of pitchers, you get much more diverse inquiline communities. So let me talk about the inquilines now. We can group the inquilines into sort of by their functional groups. There are the vermiform or the worm-like detritivores or saprotrophs. I don't really make a distinction between detritivore or saprotrophy. Let's just say they are sort of basal in the food chain. They consume the microbes or they consume the prey tissue directly. There are the filter-feeding culicids, mosquito larvae, which generally feed on bacteria, we believe, but of course there is likely quite a diversity of feeding strategies even within the filter feeders. There are the microscopic detritivores, and I emphasize that I'm not talking about microbes. Microbes are an entire topic on their own. I'm talking about really small animals like mites, which are extremely diverse and very poorly studied also. And then there are the aquatic predators, things which are found in the fluids and consume other inquilines. Here, Toxorhynchitis is a predatory mosquito larva. And then there are the terrestrial predators like the crab spider, which I mentioned just now, and a bunch of others which actually don't live in the fluids, but which stay in the pitcher environment and hunt on inquilines in the fluids. So I'm going to go through each of these groups very quickly. Of course, there's so much diversity. I wish I could talk a bit more, but we'll be here for a couple of hours if I do that. The first group is the vermiform or worm-like in form. They are the most basal in the food web. They often bury in the pitcher. The prey carcasses accumulate at the bottom, and these guys are sort of hiding among the prey carcasses at the bottom of the pitchers, and they help to break up the prey, and they dig into the hollow exoskeletons of large beetles or large ants. And the groups are mainly fly larvae, Ceratopulgonid, Phorid, and Chironomid larvae are some of the most ubiquitous. They're found almost in a good forest. You find them in almost every single pitcher. Nematodes are probably extremely common as well, but they are really poorly studied. I don't really know how to comment on them. But scuttleflies, phorids, are the other very dominant group of saprotrophs. And you might know some of these as pests. When you have leftover food waste, you always see scuttleflies coming to your kitchen and laying breeding there. And I do believe that a number of these are probably facultative. They may not be obligate mutualists or pitchers. Some of these are the megacellular species. But the Nepenthes species are almost certainly obligate mutualists of pitchers. And they are very interesting looking pupae, which sit on the sides of pitchers just above the fluid level. So you can see them kind of attached just above the fluid level, like this in a row. And the mega phorids are kind of like the most delicious inquiline species in the pictures, and so many predators want to eat them, and they to avoid this, they feed really quickly and they pupate very quickly, and their pupa are often outside of the dangerous aquatic zone, so that they are not that their pupa are kind of safe from predation. And you can see some of these. This is an unknown phorid species. This is a Nepenthes ampullera picture. The picture is like this, with the peristome here. You cut it and you turn it over and you look under the peristome. That's what you see over there. This is where these pupa are hiding. So there's no way you can see the pupa unless you dissect the picture. And the megacellular species, there's some pupa which you can see in pictures where the prey levels are really, really high. You look into these pictures, they are turbid fluids, slightly smelly kind of pictures. You get a lot of these megacellular. Yeah, so these phorids, they are the grow fast and get the heck out of there as fast as possible kind of strategy. Another very dominant group found in many pictures and very diverse are the filter-feeding mosquito larvae, the culicids. These are very conspicuous because when you look into the picture, you can see these larvae at the surface or in mid column of the water, and they're very diverse. With two genera being the most diverse, Tripteroides and Culex. Culex is a very large genus with many pest vector-borne, many blood-sucking species. We were talking about some of the rarer Culexes in pictures. Tripteroides is the genus is. Many of them are breed in Nepenthes pictures. Some of the interesting ones like this, Tripteroides, Nepenthes. You can see the number of setae is very dense, probably to assist with some sort of defense against predators. So they're very complex defense mechanisms. Some of them like this, the way they swim is very interesting. They barely move in the water column so that they don't alert predators, visual predators to their presence. Very interesting. Here you can see this is Uranotenia, this is Armigerus, this is a Culex, this is a Tripteroides, this is a Tripteroides. So yeah, many different species. And now the predators. These are one of the more interesting things. Inquiline predators are often present in long-lived species, especially. So things like Ampullaria, Bicalcata. I'm sure if you look at something like Raja, you get lots and lots of predators as well. And you get many well-known species like Toxorynchitis, which is what you call the elephant mosquito. And these are aquatic. And you also get some like Colobopsis smithsii, which is the ant, which is terrestrial. It doesn't actually live in the fluids. I'll talk about this one later. If you look closely, you squint, you can see a worm here that is actually on a sort of a spider's web. This is actually a terrestrial inquiline predator, which is really cool. I'll share a bit more about it later. Let's start with Toxorynchitis. These are the elephant mosquitoes. There are many species globally. Some are found, not all are found in pitcher plants, but in the Nepenthes species, there are a number of obligate mutualist species. They're almost always solitary because they are cannibalistic. The largest larva will eat its siblings, as well as a lot of other things in the pictures. The adults never suck blood. So this is like the best mosquito out there. It eats other mosquitoes, and the adults are pollinators, It's a very well studied genus because many have proposed that this is a solution to dengue. It's not the best solution, but it is a beautiful mosquito species that's found in pictures. Let me show you a video of Toxorynchitis acaudatus feeding on Tripteroides tenax. It's very... I love watching these videos. Admittedly, the Tripteroides are not very smart, but you get the idea of how these Toxorynchitis are quite ferocious feeders. Yeah. So this is toxorhynchitis feeding, and you know what else is cool about toxorhynchitis? It is actually, and I'm saying this without being biased, one of the most beautiful insects I've ever seen, especially when you look at them up close. And this photo is not is just real. Yeah, I enhanced the contrast a little bit, made it a bit brighter, but I did not change the color. The colors here are natural. The scales are actually purple in color and iridescent, and they are amazing under the microscope. It's really beautiful. The mosquitoes are about so big, if you squint, you can see some of this color. But it is a really beautiful mosquito on top of being a really cool inquilin predator. And in fact, this is something which I dare say is the case with many of these inquilin species. I know most of us here are plant lovers, but these insects are quite a marvel of nature in themselves. I think they're really beautiful, and you do not need to be an insect lover to be able to appreciate that, you know, the diversity that is present in pitcher plants. It's quite amazing. They are not just disgusting little worms inside your pitchers. They are very unique organisms. And I show this picture also to emphasize the point that we only know half of their life cycle, the half where they spend in pitchers. We don't know what they're doing as adults. We don't know how important pollinators or what kinds of functions they perform in the ecosystem, in the broader ecosystem of which pitcher plants are just a small part. We don't know what they do. They probably perform vital ecosystem services, but they are generally very, very poorly studied. So I'm going to talk a bit more about the other predators. Corythrella is the next one. Corythrella is from a small family. It's the only species from this Appendiculata group in Corythrellidae. They're found in these species, and they feed primarily on mites. So if you look at this, this is the Corythrella larva. It's actually really small, and you can see how they would enjoy preying on even smaller organisms like the mites. As adults, this is one of the few Nepenthes inquilines that we know quite a bit of information on because of a lot of very amazing work done by zoologists based in University Brunei Darussalam, such as Umar Graf and his colleagues. They document that many Corythrella species feed on frog blood. So you can see many interesting photos here. Another species which I love is the Nepenthes species. These are hoverflies. They're very poorly studied genus. They are likely to be extremely diverse. We have 2 species in Singapore, and Singapore is, you know, is a small country with the diversity isn't great. And even these 2 species are probably new to science. I will not be surprised that there are tens, many tens, maybe even hundreds more out there that are mutualists in other Nepenthes species that have yet to be studied. And if we know anything about hoverflies, they are important pollinators, and so these are probably very important ecologically as well. They are predatory. I'm going to show you a video. It's a very cool video of them feeding. I apologize for the sound; it's a bit weird, but see, that's the Nepenthes. That's a phorid larva that's moving there, and his motion is this fast coiling motion that traps the phorid larva. And there's another one here which is a bit similar. The one is here, and this is the and you see that's again that same motion as it traps that phorid larva. Yeah, so these are the only things I think there are very few publications, and definitely I don't think I can find any other video of Nepenthes out there. But these are very poorly studied species that are very cool in my opinion. Another one, Xenoplatyura. This is has anyone here been to the Waitomo glowworm caves in New Zealand? If you have seen that before, the worm that's responsible for these glowworm sort of sticky traps, and the worm that lives in Nepenthes pitchers called Xenoplatyura beaveri are very closely related, very similar in their strategy. They create these sticky webs that look like these. You can see this is not a spider, this is from that worm, Xenoplatyura. It's the same worm. Actually, I shouldn't say worm, it's actually a fungus net larva, but it looks like a worm, and it creates these sticky webs. Also, it hides under the peristome of Nepenthes ampullaria. And remember, I mentioned just now that forid that tries to hide by pupating on the underside of the Nepenthes ampullaria. You can see it here, and you can tell why this guy is waiting over. He's trying to feed on the emergent adult forid fly when it comes out of the pupa. These forids. So Xenoplatyura feeds on many things that emerge from the fluids as they are coming out, like the mosquito larvae especially. They get trapped and eaten almost as though a spider, as a spider would, by this fungus net larva. The Colobopsis smithsii is a swimming pitcher ant. It's a very well-known ant species. It's another predator. Now this is a terrestrial predator. I apologize that I made the transition without really talking about it. But these are terrestrial predators. I think made famous by Charles Clark in the 1990s by many very interesting studies that he did. It's a small ant species that nests in the tendrils, the hollow tendrils of the Nepenthes bicarcarata. They live purely around pitchers, and they navigate the surfaces of the peristome and the inner walls of bicarcarata easily. They swim in the fluids easily. They capture both prey that is visiting pitchers, as well as inquilines that live in pitchers, and a very, very interesting unique relationship with Nepenthes bicarcarata. And lastly, we have the frogs. The frogs are one of the most popular group. I think many people love amphibians, and there are, just now I mentioned that many amphibians are facultatively mutualistic with pitchers, but there are at least, or I shouldn't say at least, there are a number of species that are probably obligate mutualists, especially species from the Microhylidae family. Some of them shown over here. And this one is a recently described one in Nepenthes mollis, one of the few studies on highland Nepenthes inquilines, as well as a few others shown here from Ampullaria. Oh, and of course, crab spiders, which I began this talk by mentioning. Crab spiders are one of my favorites. There are at least 2 species in Singapore, Thomisus nepenthiphilus, which is this yellow one, and Misuminops nepenticola. I think it's now Henriksenia nepenticola, which is this red one. This is the male of Thomisus. They feed primarily on prey items of pitchers and secondarily on aquatic inquilines. So I have a video here again of them feeding on prey items. This is the Misuminops, the first one. I apologize for the sound. This is I should mute it. You see that it's being dragged down by, actually it's very fast, but the Misuminops is grabbing the fly and sort of dragging it down into the fluids. This is in the background over here. Dragging it down into the fluids. Whereas Thomisus nepenthiphilus has a slightly different strategy of catching the flies. In this case, it holds the fly in place. It doesn't tumble into the fluids with the flies. Of course, this is an experiment. The fly density is unusually high, but you get the idea. So you see here again. And this fly deserves to die. And more importantly, regardless of whether it's Misuminops or Nepenthes or Thomisus, after they have trapped their prey, they always bring the prey down inside the safety of the pitcher to consume the prey. And that's important because that's where they release the prey carcass as well as defecate into pitchers and thus contribute to the nutrient acquisition of pitchers. And I must point out, these are all pictures from collaborators. although I say there are 2 species in Singapore, and these are relatively well studied, there are actually many other species of crab spiders or non-crab spiders that are found in pictures, probably obligate mutualists as well. This is Nepenthes smilesiae, Neoguinensis, and alata, or at least what they called alata back then. And I'm sure there are many more out there, many more species of spiders which are associated with pictures, which may not yet be described. So I spent almost half an hour talking about so many different types of inquilines. I hope that I've covered more or less the whole diversity of them, not every single species, but at least the kind of the range of functional forms. Hope I've interested you in it a bit. But now the question remains, so are these inquilines beneficial or are they harmful to Nepenthes? Or are they, half-half, sometimes beneficial and sometimes harmful? And I'll show you a bunch of scientific studies. I hope not to bore you with too much technical details. But as I mentioned earlier, the key thing here is that pitcher plants in their native environments are nutrient limited. In other words, if inquilines can increase the amount of nutrients that are captured by pitchers, they are going to have a net beneficial effect on pitcher plants. And in experimental studies we have done, we find that generally the presence of inquilines results in higher net release in fluid nitrogen levels. Okay, how to read this graph is like this. When you increase the prey levels, when the pitcher catches more prey, of course the amount of nitrogen it's going to get on the y-axis is going to increase. This is common sense. But in the presence of inquilines, which is this blue line here, when the prey levels are low, it might be a bit counterintuitive, but when the prey levels are low, the net benefit, which is this increase from the gray to the blue, the net increase of nitrogen capture resulting from the presence of inquilines is higher. Whereas when there is a lot of prey, the net benefit of having inquilines around is kind of lost. So it's a bit of context dependency here. And generally, this is the trend we see across most of these inquiline pitcher plant relationships. It's a trend that we call in ecology stress gradient hypothesis, in the sense that, a friend in need is a friend indeed, right? And the partnerships are more beneficial. These associations are generally more beneficial when conditions are a little bit harsher, when prey are less, or when prey is a bit more difficult to digest because of thick exoskeletons or large low surface area to volume ratios. And this assistance that is provided by inquilines is known as the digestive mutualism, or in a bit more technical term, a resource conversion type of interaction. So it's the same with the tritivorous inquilines like mosquito larvae and phorid flies, as well as for crab spiders, which I just showed you just now. The crab spider, this is in situ, this is not experimental. I didn't feed the fly. I observed this in the wild. And generally, we have done studies that show that when the prey item is larger, and usually this is a flying insect, which Nepenthes gracilis is not very successful at catching. When the crab spiders are present, they help to catch prey that's difficult to catch, and then there is a net benefit for the plant, despite, of course, the spider takes a tax, when the spider consumes the prey, the net amount of nutrients in the prey is a bit lower than if the pitcher caught the prey by itself. But the increased capture rate kind of makes up for it, and the fact that it's a large-bodied prey with a lot of residual nutrients makes it more and more beneficial to pitchers when the spiders help to catch such prey. And Xenoplatula beereri, which is the one that sticky web, this species also benefits. I'm not going to talk so much about this. It also helps to recycle nitrogen to pitchers, resulting in a net increase in pitcher fluid ammonium, which is the nitrogen that pitchers use. And I want to put this question out there. These guys are eating mosquito larvae. And I said earlier that mosquito larvae and other detritivores inquilines, they help to improve the nutrient cycling rate. They help to increase nutrient release in pitchers. So is the enemy of my friend my enemy, since these guys, this Xenoplantera, the predators are eating my friend who's helping me to produce nutrients, so are they having a net negative effect? I'll talk a bit about that very quickly, but I have to mention this because it's such a beautiful and impactful study that was done by Schoner and colleagues. But the bet, this facultative mutualist Carnivora Hartwicki, it also does the same thing. It imports nutrients from outside from prey that is otherwise not often captured by Nepenthes hamster. It brings that prey in through, of course, by carrying it in its digestive system and then defecating in pitchers. So it is again another sort of a digestive mutualism of sorts. But we return to the question: if the detritivores inquilines are having a beneficial effect, they're increasing the nutrient capture of pitchers, and the predators are eating these detritivores inquilines, then are the predators now the enemies of pitchers because they are having they are reducing the population numbers of mosquitoes and phorid flies and other detritivores inquilines? To answer this question, I used a kind of a theoretical model. I'm not going to talk about this in detail, but basically we can sort of measure certain nutrient release rates and evaluate the sort of stable state situation from the release of nutrients. And for the consumption of this is a prey species and a predator species, we can see, when the predator consumes this much amount of prey and the prey population gets depressed, is the net benefit of the predator, is the net effect of the predator on pitchers still positive, or does it become negative? And we did a whole lot of studies here with coupled with experiments where we measured certain rates of growth and consumption and nutrient release, and the models always produce a stable equilibrium. You can see here, for example, a prediction of the stable equilibrium point of prey population density, predator population density, resource density, and nutrient cycling. I would want to talk about details, but basically, these in silico experiments that are calibrated with some real-life data suggest that with quite a bit of margin for error, generally, when there's predators and prey, both predator and prey present in the ecosystem of the pitchers have the most benefit, the most amount of nutrients are being released, the highest nitrogen cycling efficiency is realized in such more complex communities. When there is only a predator or only a prey species, like only phorid fly larvae or only Nepenthes species, there is an intermediate kind of level of nutrient release. And when there is no inquilines, when there are no inquilines, generally the amount of nitrogen obtained by pitchers is the lowest. So no matter how you look at it, inquilines are almost always the friends of pitcher plants, in the sense that the presence of inquilines results in a net increase in the kinds of efficiency of nutrients sequestration that pitchers can achieve. So enough of technicalities. Let's talk about some take-home messages. And this is where we try to keep it a little bit simpler. There's a saying that says a man is known by the company he keeps. And inquilines are actually, if you think about it, the closest friends of pitcher plants in some way or another. And actually that really says something about them. They were never meant to exist without each other. Okay, and I know I'm speaking to people who grow these plants in greenhouses, in sanitized environments. You may never have seen an inquiline living in the pitchers of those plants that you grow in your greenhouses. But the truth is that in the wild, inquilines are such an important part of the Nepenthes ecosystem that you will never find a pitcher that is not inhabited at some point by an inquiline, one or more inquiline species. And there are so many species of invertebrates out there whose entire lives depend entirely on pitcher plants, completely. And that really says something. It really says something about pitcher plants and their place in their natural ecosystems. And that leads us to some take-home messages. Nepenthes are crucial elements of an intricate and beautiful ecosystem. And I think we sometimes we cannot just think about conserving Nepenthes pitcher plants, this species or rare Nepenthes species. We must think about conserving their whole ecosystem. And if you think, carnivorous plants are marvelous, amazing, beautiful plants, I agree with you fully, but I spent some of the best years of my life studying these pitcher plants, and I can assure you that they are so much more beautiful than and so much more amazing than you might think, even from just looking at the plants alone. In the ecosystem, as a part of this more complex system, is so much more amazing, and that is why I must say I'm a little bit critical of the idea of ex situ conservation. And I know this is not the most popular opinion, but I know many people mean good when they talk about ex situ conservation, and I think many people who have made it their mission to conduct ex situ conservation are doing amazing good work, and I have nothing against that. I'm just saying, ex situ conservation is like when the doctor comes to you after a major car crash, and the doctor says, I'm sorry, your whole family died. You lost your arms and your legs, and you'll never be able to walk again. But at least we saved your life, It's a bit like that. That's ex situ conservation, if you think about it. It is good. You save a life, but it's still pretty damn sad, okay? Because pitcher plants in the wild, they never exist alone. They never. It is so much more complex than a greenhouse and a plant growing in a pot. And one of the reasons why I stopped collecting pitcher plants, I mentioned earlier, I collected pitcher plants when I was young. I was crazy about collecting rare species. And in Singapore, where I live, it's actually extremely easy to buy a plant like this here, from our neighboring countries that is poached from the wild. And I say this with embarrassment at myself, but I have purchased many rare species that were collected from the wild, and I was very upset with myself. And the more I think about it, the more I feel like, it's we who call ourselves pitcher plant lovers who are driving these plants to extinction. And there are countless undescribed species of inquilines out there with possibly very important ecological functions from even the best studied pitcher plants. And I think if we are taking these out of the habitat and trying to conserve them separately, that's a mistake in that. And if you don't know what plant this is Nepenthes clipiata. It's one of the most endangered Nepenthes species found from only one locality in Kalimantan called Gunung Galam. It's one of those plants that, the habitat was decimated by poachers. And I can assure you, having never studied this plant before, I can assure you that just from theory, we are probably seeing the extinction of many inquiline species that are associated with this species. Many inquiline species which probably have very important ecological functions in the unique ecosystem of Gunung Galam, this granite mountain, are probably lost, and the ecosystem is changed forever because of some people who want to grow a rare plant in their greenhouses. And I think we have to be aware of that. Okay. And the next thing I must say is that there are countless undescribed inquiline species, especially those from less studied Nepenthes species. Come and study them here. If you live, if you have ever considered coming to Southeast Asia to further your studies in a PhD or something, come. There are lots of opportunities, and I think it's a very interesting area of research. Let me answer some final frequently asked questions before I end. Should we introduce inquilines to greenhouses? This has been asked. a number of times before. Given the fact that inquilines are such an integral part of Nepenthes ecology, shouldn't we, kind of reintroduce them? I would say better not to. Yeah, I can foresee many other problems that could come of this. Outside of their home range, I would strongly discourage doing so. Within their home range, like in Singapore, if I grow pitcher plants outside, their pitchers are naturally colonized by certain inquiline species. I think that's okay. But again, even then, it has to be managed a little bit. I would not generally advocate that we must reintroduce inquiline species into captive ecosystems, artificial ecosystems, as it were. Do Nepenthes breed disease-causing mosquitoes like Aedes, blood-sucking species? Of the little that we know, yes, they can. They can breed Aedes albopictus. It's been published studies. But no, they are not generally habitats for such species. In some massive surveys that we conducted in Singapore, we could not find a single Aedes breeding in pitchers. They are capable of doing so, I'm sure, but generally it's quite hard for them to do so. Some of the species, some of the obligate inquiline mosquito species are probably blood-sucking species. I would not deny that, especially things like Armigerus, which are closely related to the Aedes species. They are probably they probably suck human blood. We don't know for sure, but as far as we know, they are not disease vector mosquitoes. None of the disease vector mosquitoes are reproducing pitcher plants regularly. Do you still work on Nepenthes inquilines? I must apologize that at the moment, not really. In academia, it's not easy to survive researching such a narrow and niche field like pitcher plants. I broadened my research to other topics in terrestrial forests and urban ecosystems. But if any of you here are someone who researches on these and you want to collaborate, I'll be very excited to. Please get in touch. If you want to do a PhD in NTU, in my lab to work, and you want to work on the Nepenthes inquilines, I cannot promise you good funding, but I would really say please get in touch as well. I would love to get in touch and explore possibilities. Pitcher plants are my first love, and I dream that one day I will be able to work on them again someday in the future. So that's all I have for today. A brief acknowledgement. A lot of this work that I presented here is not my own. I had a lot of great collaborators, researchers, people who worked on many of these taxa in much more rigor than I have. Thank you so much for your attention.
Okay, so thank you, Weng Ngai. You just did a great webinar for the International Carnivorous Plant Society, and we're an organization of horticulturists, conservationists, scientists, and educators, all interested in sharing the wonderful world of carnivorous plants. We've been around since the 70s, so we just celebrated our 50th anniversary. And the society is a registered nonprofit, which means if somebody wants to donate to our organization, you can probably get some tax incentives. In the past couple of years, we've created 5 animated videos for kids and people who are just getting into the hobby, so you can learn what exactly is a carnivorous plant, how to grow them indoors, how to grow them outdoors, how to hand feed a Venus flytrap, how to acclimate your new carnivorous plant. And we've recently been adding a lot of free webinars coming up. So in the next month or two, we have these webinars coming out. And then in early 2025, I'm already starting the schedule. This year on Wednesday, May 7th, 2025, it is going to be the 5th annual World Carnivorous Plant Day. And if you're interested in seeing what we did for the past couple of years, you can go to our YouTube channel and you can view over 20 videos for each year. So we're approaching 100 videos from scientists and growers and nursery people from all over the world. So we want to be like the one-stop shop for carnivorous plants. So we're talking about conservation and growing, and all of it is free on our YouTube channel. And I want everyone to save the date. Wednesday, May 7th. It's always the first Wednesday of May. If you want to become involved, if you want to present, you can send me a message. You can send me an email. And we're looking for people with different experience. We're looking for people who grow carnivorous plants on their windowsill, but we're also interested in people who are going to Singapore and measuring the acidity of pitcher plants. So we want people who are hiking, and we want people who are in, snowy Alaska growing a sundew on the windowsill. Membership is a way of contributing to our international exchange of knowledge, and you can go to this website to become a member. A benefit of being ICPS members, you get access to our very inexpensive seed bank. Our seed bank is only as good as what our members make it. So if you have extra seeds, please consider donating them. We can usually ship seeds worldwide. And I think the most special thing about our organization is the quarterly newsletter, Carnivorous Plant Newsletter. That's been around since 1972. And if you become a member, you'll get a beautiful quarterly colored newsletter. But what's even more special is you get access to the last 50 years of newsletters. They're all digitally printed on our website. And you can be like Weng Ngai, and you can go through all those articles and fall in love with carnivorous. The newsletter contains horticulture articles, research papers, field trip reports, conservation news, books and literature reviews, communications from members. We are the official cultivar publisher. So if you have a carnivorous plant that's really special that you bred, you can register it with us. We also include artwork, meeting announcements. So please consider writing for that if you have any of those things you want to share. Every August, we have our Carnivores in the Classroom grant, where we find teachers K through 12 with $150 worth of live carnivorous plants shipped directly to their classroom, so they can excite the new generation about botany and specifically carnivorous plants. In order to get that grant, you have to write, or teachers or students have to write, a lesson plan. And all of the lesson plans are available for free on our website. So you can implement them at your home, or if you have a teacher friend, you can share them with them. This year, these are the nurseries that donated the live plants to teachers from all over the world. And in the center, we have Carnivorous, which is a 3D printer company, and they donated a 3D printed carnivorous plant of their choosing to each teacher. And if you have a 3D printer, you can go to our website and you can use the instructions for free, and you can print your own carnivorous plant. And Weng Ngai, I hope you appreciate it. 2 out of 2 Nepenthes are lowland Nepenthes. Bicalcarata and ampullaria. Another way you can help fund the ICPS conservation and education efforts is by going to our dropship store, and you can get tote bags, t-shirts, hoodies, and they ship internationally, and all proceeds benefit our education and conservation programs. And the ICPS is a volunteer organization with an increasing voice in the world of conservation, which we're going to talk to Weng Ngai about in just a moment. And if you want to become involved in our conservation programs, you could contribute an article to the Carnivorous Plant Newsletter, CPN, and just feel free to reach out to our editors. And this is maybe from 2 newsletters ago, but you can see there's quite a bit of conservation work. Every other year, we have a conference in person. And in 2025, we're taking off, but in 2026, we'll be in the Americas. We could be in North America, Central America, or South America. We will be making that announcement probably April or May of 2025. So you'll have a full year to plan for the conference. The last conference was in Vienna, Austria, and we had almost 200 people attending live, which includes growers, and there's lots of plant sales, but there's also famous scientists that you could interact with. Okay, Weng Ngai, I'm going to ask you some questions now. Thank you for my brief commercial break. And in the US, we break apart symbiosis into like mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. And Luke says, it sounds like inquilines are similar to the gut flora of mammalian digestive systems. Is there like a distinct criteria for what is a mutualistic relationship? Can you measure that in a way?
Yeah, that's a great question. This idea of dividing relationships into commensalism, mutualism, etc., it's admittedly quite an old school idea. It's generally well understood now that all interactions are context dependent to some degree. In other words, the degree of benefit changes with certain environmental variables, and some relationships which have a positive benefit in certain situations might have a negative benefit in other situations. So actually, I don't have a good answer to this, because the textbooks across the board still hold the old idea, one or the other kind of classification. But it is important to note that universally, these relationships are going to change quite a bit, and yeah, so I'm sorry. Generally, a more contemporary way of talking about it is saying whether a relationship has a positive effect or a negative effect in certain contexts.
All right. Luke also asks, is pitcher fluid itself too caustic or inhospitable for insects to survive? Of course, they could drown. But in other words, what special or specific adaptations do these little inquilines have to live in this special pitcher fluid?
Thanks. Yeah, this is a very commonly asked question, and the truth is that no, pitcher fluids, when insects fall into pitcher fluids, the cause of death is usually drowning. It's not being eaten alive by enzymes or something. It doesn't happen that way, or being burnt by acids or something. No, it doesn't happen that way. If you go to any peat swamp, or even in some of you might rear fish, aquarium fish, and some of these fish like very acidic waters of pH 3 or 4 or 2, in that kind of range. That's a kind of range of pitcher fluids. So it's actually pretty habitable. It's probably not good for your skin in the long run, but it's not going to kill an insect upon contact. In fact, many species like Nepenthes ampullaria have very benign pH of around 7, which is very, very habitable. So yes, it's not the acidity isn't the main issue.
All right. Another question is, in the wild, there's a lot of hybridization. Has there been studies on wild occurring Nepenthes hybrids and what inquiline species they can get?
This is a very interesting question, and I don't have an answer. I'm really sorry. I only have anecdotal observations, which are simply that, as you would expect, the communities are somewhat overlapping. So, for example, Hookeriana, which is a natural hybrid of Ampullaria and Rafflesiana, tends to have all the kinds of species that you would see in Ampullaria and Rafflesiana minus a few here and there, you know. Of course, the sample size is not large enough. I'm sure it's something that can be studied a bit further, but it is not less in the sense that because many of these inquilines are quite generalist, they can live in different a number of different Nepenthes species. So a hybrid is just going to be another kind of environment for them.
Okay, Tristan says, thank you for the great talk. We have documented a fascinating cockroach Nepenthes interaction in Nepenthes peltata. Just a curious question. During your fieldwork studying Nepenthes, have you observed something similar?
No, I've never. I just clicked on the link that you shared, and it's amazing. I think it's really cool. And it's great that you got that information out there. That's one of the most important things, I think. You know, don't just keep it to yourself. Share it. Write a short paper. I think that's amazing. I've never seen that before. But I agree with you that it probably is a bit of a Nepenthes xenic behavior in the sense that it's probably a bit opportunistic, and there are some ant species, and I think there's one or two published records of some frog species, or some other species that might just benefit from a little bit of the moisture, if as long as they can navigate the slippery surfaces of pitches. Yeah, I can see how a bunch of species might benefit in some ways in similar types of interactions. But it's still really amazing. For all we know, it's a little bit more, maybe the association is a bit tighter than we thought. Who knows?
I'm in Florida, and we have elephant mosquitoes. And I also have experienced cockroaches in my very large Nepenthes bicalcarata, but they're dead. So maybe it's special native cockroaches that can get out. Before you mentioned the ex situ and in situ conservation, I wrote down that at the last conference, Andreas Fleischmann did an entire presentation about why in situ conservation is the best. Because when you have ex situ conservation, it's exactly what you said, but I'm just reminding people that the problems with you saving a species in a captive situation is if you don't protect the environment, there's nowhere to return that organism to, but you're also not doing all those interactions in the food web. And another comment was, since we only know about half of the insect's life, which is inside the pitcher plant, how would entomologists go about studying the rest of the life cycle? Because that would be a great interdependent study on how Nepenthes are not just connected to the inquilines, but to the larger forested community. Is there a way for an entomologist to easily study where these little organisms fly off to?
It's a very difficult question. It's a lot of it's hard to. I mean, the most basic thing is back to the basics, natural history observations in the fields. Just observations of plants and pollinators, that kind of thing. I don't have like a fixed answer. I myself am a little bit of a pretender when it comes to being an entomologist. but in any case, I must point out something which is that there are actually tons of unstudied species in tropical areas, tons of unstudied insect and invertebrate species in tropic areas, and while I say that inquilines are very unstudied, they are just more of already a very large body of unstudied insects, and I would think that the approach would not be so much as to like, okay, I'm going to study what this particular Nepenthes inquiline does, and I try to follow it around and figure it out. But you would try to study the ecosystem and the invertebrates in the ecosystem, and by chance you would chance upon one of the many unknowns would be some Nepenthes inquilines, some emergence, some insect that it was in its larval form from the Nepenthes picture. So I think it shouldn't be like I am only going to study Nepenthes inquilines kind of thing.
All right. The last comment question, Anna says, amazing presentation. I love this topic since I am currently a PhD student working mostly with crominid species, like those little midges that don't bite. I love learning something new related to aquatic macroinvertebrates. What would be the best way to contact you? And then, Weng Ngai, this would be a good maybe message for people who are watching the recording, because that's when we get lots of scientists and more interaction. So can you just say again the organization or university that you're associated with?
Sure, I'll just flash it here as well. You can contact me there. My email is there. That's my website, my lab website. Yeah, please feel free to contact me. Even if it's just for a chat, I would love, just a conversation about anything. Yeah, pitcher plants, your PhD on chironomics.
All right, thank you everyone for attending this live, and thank you so much, Weng Ngai, for a great presentation.
Thanks again for having me. And
it's not a surprise that gardeners, educators, and scientists are fascinated by these unique plants. The International Carnivorous Plant Society, or ICPS, not only love these plants, but welcomes growers just getting started all the way through professional scientists. The ICPS even started an annual World Carnivorous Plant Day to celebrate them. The free online event is held the first Wednesday of May. Take a look around our website and you'll find historic documents about carnivorous plants, growing guides, free educational resources, and more. Have questions? Ask. We don't bite, but our plants do.